Let's talk about ego. You've probably wondered at some point whether you're an egocentric person. And honestly, if you clicked on this video, you probably aren't. But ego doesn't only affect egocentric people. It might be changing you too, without you even noticing. And in a way, that's not entirely a bad thing. Ego's part of being human. You can't completely get rid of it, and honestly, it wouldn't make sense to. To some extent, we need it. It helps us pursue the goals we set for ourselves. The problem begins when it stops serving us and starts making decisions for us. When you're no longer choosing what you want to do, but what you think other people will approve of. That's when it can become a barrier. To begin with, I think we need to understand what ego is in a simple way. Ego is the idea you have of who you are. It's not your whole self, but more like a mental character trying to protect your image. It's like a bodyguard for your self-esteem. Its intention, at least at first, isn't bad. It wants to stop you from feeling inadequate. The problem is when it becomes overprotective and starts making decisions on your behalf. And that happens more often than you think. And all those things you do without ever really asking yourself whether you actually want to do them, or whether you're doing them so other people could see a version of you that feels more acceptable. That's what we're going to talk about today. Ego has many ways of sabotaging you, but there's one that is especially deceptive because it feels productive. Talking. When it comes to achieving your goals, talking and doing are competing for the same resources. And here's what surprised me most when I learned this. Research suggests that the brain can confuse talking about a goal with actually working toward it. When we give a whole speech about what we want to achieve, we can unconsciously feel like we've already made progress. I've spent 2 hours talking about this. Doesn't that count as progress? The answer is no. Even if your brain interprets it as a sign of progress, talking is not the same as doing. The more we talk about a pending task, the easier it is for the brain to feel like we're already closer to achieving it. But that feeling's misleading. Talking gives you the impression of progress without any real action behind it. That's why in the early stages of any project, talking about it can almost become therapy for the brain. It makes you feel like you've already started. And that's dangerous, because that's exactly the moment when you need the most discipline. That's when you need to resist the urge to explain it to everyone and actually get to work. I think silence is one of the greatest strengths a person can have. But the ego can't tolerate silence. For the ego, being silent is almost the same as disappearing. If you don't tell anyone, if nobody knows, if nobody can validate it, is it really happening? The ego needs witnesses. It needs someone to see it in order to feel that it has value. And that brings us to another question. What happens when you've already achieved it? When success finally arrives? After spending so much time in silence, it seems logical to think, now I could tell the world. But for me, the answer is still not necessarily. Because if achieving that goal's truly made you feel fulfilled within yourself, why would you need to talk about it right now? If you already have it, if you already feel that internal satisfaction, what does showing it to everyone really add? There's a quote that says, "Work in silence, let success make the noise." I've never been fully convinced by it. And that's exactly where the ego's trap lies. Because if the goal only matters when other people see it, if you need applause for the achievement to feel real, maybe it wasn't as truly yours as you thought. The question isn't whether you could talk about it. The question is whether you need to talk about it for the achievement to feel like enough. And if there's one place where ego finds its perfect habitat, it's social media. I experienced this myself. For a long time, I used to post a lot. Photos from trips I took, pictures of myself studying or reading, photos of the sport I practiced. Things that, on the surface, seem completely normal. Until one day I did an exercise I'd recommend. Before going to sleep, I grabbed a notebook and a pen and wrote down the pros and cons of using social media. And obviously, it wasn't all bad. If it were, nobody would use it. Social media allows you to connect with people, talk to people you're interested in, and for many people, even make a living. That's fine. But I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about the average person who doesn't make a living from social media and simply posts parts of their life, a trip, a workout, an achievement. And that's when I ask myself an uncomfortable question. Why do I need to post this? Because if I'm honest, I can't find a reason that doesn't have something to do with ego. With wanting someone to see it and wanting other people to think something about me. When someone posts what they're doing on social media, the justification's often, I'm not posting it for other people, I'm posting it for myself. And I understand that it can feel that way. But if you're posting it on a social network, you're putting it in front of other people. If it were really just for you, you'd take the photo and keep it in your camera roll. Or you'd send it privately to someone close to you. But when you publish it, it's no longer just for you. There's an intention to show. To say, even indirectly, look where I am. Look what I'm doing. Look how I live. For a long time, I did exactly the same thing without ever asking myself, why? And when I finally did ask myself, I didn't really like the answer I found. Because I realized that many of the things I did while thinking about how they would look, not how they would feel. Maybe I'm a bit radical about this, I admit that. But from that day on, I never posted anything from my personal life on social media again. And what I discovered was that I enjoyed things more. When I traveled, I was actually there. When I trained, I was actually in the training session. When I experienced something good, I lived it without half of my mind thinking about how I was going to tell everyone later. I remember seeing one of those, "What do you do for a living?" videos a while ago, where they asked that question to the actor Willem Dafoe. After talking a bit about his work, the interviewer asked him, "How would you like to be remembered?" And I thought his answer was beautiful. He simply said, "I don't think about that." He didn't say how he wanted to be remembered. He didn't say he didn't want to be remembered either. He simply said it wasn't something he cared about. And I found that incredible, because it goes directly against what the ego wants. The ego wants to leave a mark, wants to control the image other people will have of you, even after you're gone. Dafoe answered from a different place, from the perspective of someone who doesn't seem obsessed with controlling how others perceive him. And I asked myself a question. What's the point of spending energy thinking about how people will remember you after you die, instead of living your day-to-day life more fully? What's the point of building an image for the future if you're losing the present along the way? Not everything has to be done with how it looks to others in mind. Sometimes real freedom's found in caring less about being remembered and caring more about how you're living today. Now, I want to talk about something more difficult, but also very important. How ego can distance you from happiness. When we think of ego, we usually imagine something related to showing off or wanting to stand out. But ego can also appear in a much quieter form, through performed sadness. Many times, in order to get attention, or simply to fit into a certain character, we can start acting as if our life is worse than it really is. You probably know someone who makes comments like, "My life is a mess. Everything goes wrong for me. I'm a disaster." And many times from the outside, you don't see their life that way. Maybe that person doesn't even fully believe it either. But those comments serve a purpose. They attract attention. They create a reaction. They make other people ask questions or take care of you. And there, the ego finds a different way to feel important. Not through success, but through drama. The problem is that even if, at first, it seems like a joke or a harmless comment, repeating that narrative has consequences. If a person gets used to talking about themselves as if everything's wrong, little by little, they reinforce that idea. The brain is very literal in that sense. It doesn't always distinguish very well between what you say seriously and what you say as a joke. If you constantly tell it that your life's a mess, over time it starts processing that as truth. And the interesting thing is that this also works the other way around. There are studies showing that happier people tend to interpret what they experience in a more positive way. The training session that feels endless can be torture, or it can be a challenge. The material you have to study can be a burden, or it can be something that will open doors for you in the future. The situation doesn't change. What changes is the frame you use to look at it. And over time, that changes how you feel. I'm not telling you to pretend you're fine when you're not. I'm telling you that the way you speak to yourself while you're pursuing your goals matters more than you think. Because the road's long, and if you experience it as constant suffering, you're going to burn out before you arrive. But if you train your mind to find something valuable in the process, even something small, the journey becomes different. We all have bad moments, and it's okay to say that. But there's a big difference between admitting that you're going through a difficult period and turning sadness into a personality just to stand out. Because if you turn discomfort into your way of getting attention, you might end up distancing yourself from a happier life without even realizing it. I want to finish with something personal. Since I started reading about ego and trying to control it in myself, something happened that I didn't expect. I started seeing it everywhere. In the people who arrive at a beautiful place and the first thing they do is take a picture. In the person who goes to a concert and spends the whole thing recording it on their phone. I don't know, there are so many situations like that. And at first it made me uncomfortable. But over time, I understood that this discomfort was also ego. Because judging other people for their ego is, in itself, a form of ego. That feeling of, I don't need to do that anymore, is exactly the kind of superiority the ego enjoys. No one's free from this. Not me. Not you. So if you ever decide to work on this, and you start noticing those behaviors in other people, try not to fall into the trap of feeling superior. That's not the point. The point's not to reach a place where you no longer have an ego and can look down on everyone else. It's about something much more ordinary and much more humble. It's about asking yourself one question more often. Am I doing this because I truly want to, or because I want someone else to see it? The answer won't always be comfortable, but asking the question is already a step. Living in a way that, when nobody's watching, when there's no photo, when there's nobody applauding, still feels like enough for you. That's what the ego can't give you. And that's exactly what is worth building.